All right, please bow. Stand and cover your heads. I've been reading way too much Catholic stuff this week. Trying to get some historical information. All right, here we go. I'm going to read the scriptures today. We're in Vayikra, otherwise known as Leviticus chapter 7, and this is what it says in the Hebrew. Vezot Torah ha'asham kodesh kadashim hu bi mekom asher yishechatu et ha'ola yishechatu ve'et damo yizeroch al hamizbeach saviv ve'et kol chelbo yakeriv mi menu et ha'alya ve'et ha'chelev ha'mechase et ha'kerev ve'et shete ha'kelayot ve'et ha'chelev asher alehem asher al ha-kesalim ve'et ha-yoteret al ha-kaved al ha-kelayot yesirena ve'hiketir otam ha-kohen ha-mizbecha ishe la Yahweh Ashamhu Kol Zachar Ba Kohanim Yochelenu Bemakom Kadosh Yeachel Kadesh Kadashim Hu Ka Chatat Ka Asham Torah Achat Lahem HaKohen Asher Yechaper Bo Lo Yiyeh והכהן המקריב את עולת איש אור העולה אשר הקריב לכהן לא יהיה וכל מיכה אשר תאפה בתנור וכל נעשה במרחצת ועל מחבת לכהן המקריב או לא תהיה, וכל מיכה ולולה בשמן וחרבה לכל בני אהרון תהיה איש כאחיו, וזאת תורת זבח השלמים אשר יקריב לידי. אם על תודה יקריבנו והקריב על זבח התודה הלot mazot. What's happening here? That hurts. I have no idea. It's hurting me though. Where was I? Torah halot mazot belotot בשמן ורקיקי מזות משוחים what? Oh, I thought you were laughing at me. בשמן ורקיקי מזות משוחים בשמן וזולת מורבכת חלות בלוטות בשמן. על חלות להם חמץ יקריב קרבנו על זבח של הניב, והקריב ממנו אחד מכל קרבן תרומה ליהווה, לכהן הזורח את דם השלמים לא יהיה. ובשר זבח תודת של הניב ביום קרבנו יאכל לא יניח ממנו עד בוקר. ואם נדר או נדבה זבח קרבנו ביום הקריבו את זבחו יאכל, וממחרת ממנו יאכל. והנותר מבשר הזבח ביום השלישי באש יישרף. ואם האכול יאכל מבשר זבח שלמיו ביום השלישי לא ירזה, המקריב אותו לא יחשב לו פיגול, יהיה והנפש האוכלת ממנו עוונה תישא. והבשר אשר ייגע בכל טמא לא יאכל באש יישרף, והבשר כל טהור יאכל בשר, והנפש אשר תאכל בשר מזבח השלמים אשר ליהווה טומאתו עליו, ונכרתה הנפש ההיא מעמיה. ונפש כי תיגע בכל טמא בטומאת אדם בהמה טמא, או בכל שקץ טמא, ואכל מבשר זבח השלמים אשר ליהווה, ונכרתה הנפש ההיא מעמיה. וידבר יהווה אל משה לאמור. I think I forgot it. דבר אל בני ישראל לאמור, כל חלב שור וכסב ועץ לא תאכלו, וחלב נבלה וחלב תרפה יעשה לכל מלאכה, ואכול לא תאכלוהו, כי כל אוכל חלב מן הבהמה אשר יקריב ממנה אישה, ונכרתה הנפש האוכלת מעמיה. וכל דם לא תאכלו בכל מושבותיכם לעוף ולבהמה. כל נפש אשר תאכל כל דם, ונכרתה הנפש ההיא מעמיה. וידבר יהווה אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל לאמור, המקריב את זבח שלמיו ליהווה, יביא את קרבנו ליהווה מזבח שלמיו. ידיו תביאנה את אישי יהווה את החלב על החזה, יביאנו את החזה להניף אותו תנופה לפני יהווה. והכתיר הכהן את החלב המזבחה, והיה החזה לאהרון ולבניו, ואת שוק הימים תיתנו תרומה לכהן מזבחי שלמיהם. המקריב את דם השלם ואת החלב מבני אהרון, לא תהיה שוק הימים למנה, כי את חזה התנופה ואת שוק התרומה לקחתי מאת בני ישראל מזבחי שלמיהם, ואתן אותם לאהרון הכהן ולבניו לחוק עולם מאת בני ישראל. זאת משחת אהרון ומשחת בניו מאישי יהווה ביום הקריב אותם לכהן ליהווה אשר ציווה יהווה לתת להם ביום משחו אותם מאת בני ישראל חוקת עולם לדורותם. זאת התורה לעולה למנחה ולחטאת ולאשם ולמילואים ולזבח השלמים. אשר ציווה יהווה את משה בהר סיני ביום זבותו את בני ישראל להקריב את קורבניהם ליהווה במדבר Sinai. Okay, you may be seated. Had to add the rolling R to the end there. I knew something was weird. This thing is not working right these days. All right, so Onkelos's Vaikra by Drazin Wagner says, verses 1 through 10 of chapter 7 contain the rules concerning the asham, that's the Hebrew word for guilt offering. They say that 11 through 18 and 23 or 28 through 34, the laws of Shelamim, which are the peace offerings. Remember, peace is in plural somehow because it's Hebrew, not English. Verses 19 through 21, they say the requirement of those who handle and eat sacrificial meat to be ritually pure. And verses 22 through 27 are the prohibitions about blood and fat, which with a closing summary in 35 through 38. Well, don't worry about that. I have discovered that they appear in verses 12, 13, and 15. I have no idea why they left that out. All right, so verse 1. Very literally in Hebrew, it would say, and this instruction, holy holies he. All right, so the guilt offering is in the holy holies. Holy of holies. Nope. Vezot, and this. Torah. Now this, listen to what it said. It did not say Torah or Torah or Torah. It said Torat. It has the at the end instead of the Well, so that's feminine for one thing. But I used to do this all the time. Some of you know this. Probably all of you know this. But when I was traveling and teaching, I used to ask, now who wants to answer this trick question? Of course, almost every hand in the room would go up, and I would say, what is the Hebrew word for law? Every hand in the room would go up, and everybody's like, ooh, pick me, pick me. And it made no difference who I picked. Whoever I picked always said Torah. Nope. I told you this was a trick question. The word Torah, and thusly Torat, they are the word for instruction or instructions, if in plural. This is, in fact, in plural. So it's instructions to the law. It is not the law. Mitzvah, mitzvot, that's law or laws. That's the word for law. That's the Hebrew word for law, mitzvah. It's not the word Torah. Torah are the instructions of the mitzvah. We need to learn that. We all need to learn that. So it's just instruction, It says ha, asham, so the guilt. Asham is literally the word for guilt or blame or fault, but it comes with the connotation of offering. Idea of a guilt offering. So we don't need to put the word for offering after the word asham, because asham is a guilt offering. It is both words. All right. Moving on. Kodesh. Well, that's holy. And you know what holy is? It's so perfectly pure. It's like holy people who never make a mistake ever. Oh, wait, that's not what holy is. Holy is something that is set aside. Something is very specifically for a certain purpose. And since we're talking about the laws of God and the way we do the sacrifices for God, we're talking about the things that are set aside for God in this particular case. So it's things that are set apart. For instance, they had an incense table where they had the incense on it. That table and the incense and all that was set aside to be used only for that purpose. They had an ark that was used only for the purpose of the presence of God dwelling upon. They had all kinds of things in there. They had a lamp, the uh, menorah that was set over to one side, and the table was on the other side. Those things were for purpose and that purpose only. You did not take the menorah from inside the Holy of Holies home with you at night so you can have light in your house. No, these are set aside for a very specific purpose. So, and there's lots of things that can be done that way. The clothing that I wear on Shabbat, that is set aside for the Shabbat. I don't wear this particular clothing any other day of the week, any other time. They are for the work of God. So, yes, I do use the same clothing for the feasts and things like that, because essentially I'm doing exactly the same for God, right? So these are set aside specifically for that purpose, and I use them for no other. All right, so that's what makes this stuff holy. It's not that it's perfect and pure, and you're never going to find a scratch or a tear in it, because, I don't know, we found a couple little bitty holes in my last one. That's why I replaced it. All right, so our next word is kadoshim. So you have kadosh, which is the singular. Kadoshim is the plural. So holy, holies. It does not say holy of holy holies. I had someone ask me one time, isn't it implied holy of holies? And I said, no, it's not implied. You don't need that in Hebrew. Well, she was taking Hebrew from a person who spoke no Hebrew at the local college, and he told her I was wrong. Good luck with that. No, it's not implied. Maybe we have to have it so that we can understand Hebrew and English. That is a terrible, you'll never learn Hebrew. You will never master it in any way, shape, or form if you're trying to understand Hebrew in the English language. So no, you don't have of. We do have the word has been added to the Hebrew language uh, for of, but I don't ever use it. Why? There's no point in it. Anyway, so then it says who, so it's either it or he, as you know. So our translation is, and this is the instruction of the guilt offering. It is very holy. Holy holies means very holy, right? Because it's not being used of a place here. It's not a noun. It is very holy. Other words, guilt offering. The word asham, I spoke of it earlier. This is Vaikra by Drazin and Wagner, points out that the use of the word asham shows us that the emphasis is on the sacrifice, not the guilt. I agree with that. I don't think that the word itself proves that, but I do believe that the structure of the sentence does. They also said Saadia adds sacrifice in his Arabic translation. Okay, maybe that's the way you understand Hebrew and Arabic. I have no idea. That sounds to me like the same thing, right? He's adding a word that he thinks needs to be there for him to understand it in that language. All right, but they also said it's unnecessary in Hebrew as well as the Aramaic, because the Targum used asham, which signifies the sacrifice. What they're saying is it's not necessary in Hebrew, and it's not necessary in Aramaic, although the Targum, which is written in Aramaic, oh no, they're saying that the Targum, which is written in Aramaic, only used the word asham because they didn't need another word added to it to make it a offering, because asham is an offering. All right. Of the words, it is very holy, Drazina Wagner also pointed X, which explains the instruction. They called it the law, of course, but instruction concerning things that are very holy apply here because the word asham is used. No, this is very, very wrong. They had their heads in the clouds that day. They saw something shiny and missed it. I don't know what was up with that. The reason why it's very holy is because the sentence ends with Kodesh, Kodeshim, yeah, is it Kodesh or Kadesh? I want to get this right since I'm picking on somebody. Yeah, it is Kodesh. Well, that's what I have down as Kodesh. It could be Kadesh, Kadeshim, or Kadesh, Kodeshim, or Kodesh, Kodeshim, or Kodesh, Kadeshim. It makes no difference. It's still holy holies. That's why it's very holy. Not because of some other word, not because of sentence structure. It's very holy because God said it's very holy. And that's the only reason. All right, so verse 2. Very literally, it would say, in place that he kill they the offering, he kill they the guilt offering, and blood he spatter upon the altar round about. So we start off with be makom, in place. Makom, that place right there, that place, that place, that place, that place over there. Place. It's a very specific place. So what is he saying? Well, he's saying in the place, and then it says asher yishechatu, in the place where they kill et haolah, in the place where they sacrifice, where they slay the burnt offering. See, we've already gone through the burnt offerings. We're not talking specifically about the burnt offerings in this chapter, but all it's saying is in that burnt offering was slaughtered, ye shechatu. You're going to slay this animal in that same place. So there's not going to be one place for one kind of slaughter and one place for another kind of slaughter. It's all going to happen in the same place. Then it says, et ha-asham. There's your word, asham. There's your guilt offering. That's the guilt offering. Let's look at what it says about fault, guilt, blame, which anyone incurs, that by which anyone contacts guilt. Sacrifice for transgression. In the Mosaic law, there is a careful distinction between these sacrifices for, they say trespass here, that's guilt, and sacrifice. So there's a difference between a guilt offering and a sin offering. I'm gonna help you out with that here in a minute. Then it says ve'et damo, so and the blood, yizerok, probably hear it yizrok by most, but that's not how they would have spoken it back then. They would have said yizerok. He will splatter it, he will spatter it, he will smatter it. I don't know what you should call it, but the way you need to think of that is taking a paintbrush, dipping it in some paint, and just slinging that paintbrush. That is the way you should see this, because that's essentially what they were doing. Then it says, all hamiz be'ach. So it's on the altar. On the altar, right? It can be this way, it can be that way, it can be with two hands, who cares? Saviv, round about. Boy, that raises a lot of issues. So the translation then is, in the place that they slay the burnt offering, he will slay the guilt offering, and its blood will spatter on the altar all around it. Now we might say, and its blood will be splattered on the altar all around it. Kyle and Deluche say of verse 2, the slaughtering and sprinkling of the blood were the same as in the case of the burnt offering, and they're basing that on chapter 1, verse 5. And therefore, no doubt, the signification was the same. So now I'm going to compare that to chapter 1, verse 5, which says, and this is my translation from when we did this, And he will kill the calf from the herd in the presence of Yahweh. And the children of Aharon, the Kohanim, will bring the blood and sprinkle it around the altar at the entrance of the Ohel Moed. Ohel, not, I'm sorry, I put one in there, shouldn't have gone. The 10 of appointed times. The Colin Deluche said, also, speaking of verse 1:5, in the case of the burnt offering, the blood was swung against the altar round about. In other words, against all four sides, all four walls, if you will, of the altar, not over the surface of the altar. In other words, it was poured out of the vessel against the wall of the altar with a swinging motion. This was also done with the peace offering, but not with the sin offering. The sin offering was definitely handled differently, but to tell you the truth, nobody knows. Slung it on all four sides, if they just did a motion like that and just covered it around, nobody actually knows. This is all speculation, and these guys talk like they're experts and know beyond any shadow of a doubt how this was done, but the truth is, there's 1,000 different ways that it could have been done, and probably 1,000 different ways that it was done. As long as it's sprinkled around, roundabout, which is a very, very general term. That does not mean that all four sides have to be splattered. It does not mean that the edges have to be splattered. It just means roundabout. And whatever that means to any individual, that's what it means. All right, so in verse 3, and he bring from us the tail and the fat, the hidden, the midst. This is going to sound really familiar because we've been through this one a bazillion times at this point. But there's a reason for it, and we are talking about a different sacrifice. So maybe there's something different. Maybe the reason why we're doing it again is just to make sure that the reader understands it's supposed to be done exactly the same way. We won't know until we look. All right, so it says ve'et, so it's and then you got an arrow pointing, kol chelbo, and all the fat of it. That's the fat, that's the best or most excellent of any kind, the fat of a lamb, the best of its fruit, the fat heart. We're actually talking about fat here. Then it says, Yakefri, he will approach, he will come near. It's to draw near to this thing. And this is mimanu. That's from us. From us. In Hebrew, their endings are very different than the way we would do that. We would not say from us. It could have said from him, from her, from them, from they. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that it could have been said. And to tell you the truth, they make very little, if any, difference at all. And if we change it so that it makes more sense to us, that doesn't hurt anything because we have not changed the meaning by doing so. So we're going to see a little later on if I'm right about that. Et ha-al-yah, that's the tail. The al-yah is the tail. That's the thick and fat tail of a sheep. Then it says, ve'et ha-chelev. Didn't we start with that? Of course we did. The fat. Then it says that's the fat. Ha-mechaseh, or ham-chaseh, I think would be modern. I'm not real good with the modern, so that's not the way they would have said it in biblical times. It would have been ha-mechaseh, the hidden, that which is covered over, that which is concealed. This is et ha-kerev, in the midst. Now, do you remember what that was? You will in a minute. So my translation, and all of its fat he will bring from us, the tail, and the hidden fat in the torso. Remember that? The midst, the middle of the animal is the torso. So you're going to bring this stuff from the torso. Kyla DeLuch say of verses 3 through 5, because this is going to connect to this verse and in the next two. The fat portions only were to be burned upon the altar, vis-a-vis, they like to say, the same as in the sin offerings and pieces offerings. I need to say pieces because I don't want you to think it's the other word. It sounds like that. It's peace, P-E-A-C-E, but it's plural, so it's pieces. Let's call it the pieces offering, okay? Because if we start using all these different words that it gets translated into English, we're never going to understand this. But if we get real strict about what we call these things, we won't get confused. This will be the first time we can ever get through a set of offerings that we will fully understand by the time we're finished. Isn't that exciting? So let's do that. Let's call it the sin offering because it's in singular form, and we'll call it the pieces offering because peace is in plural form, and then we'll call it the the guilt offering. We're not going to call it a trespass offering. We're not going to do that. We're going to call it the guilt offering, again, because it's in singular. So anyway, they said the same as in the sin offerings and pieces offerings, and they're basing that on chapter 4, verse 8 and chapter 3, verse 9. But the flesh, they say, was to be eaten by the priests as in the sin offering, the same way as the sin offering. In other words, from chapter 6, verse 22. Verse 6, chapter 6, verse 22. Then they said, inasmuch as there was the same, I'm going to say instruction, in this respect for both the sin offering and the guilt offering. And these parts of the sacrificial service must therefore have had the same meaning. They're saying that, which offering are we on? I've already forgotten. What?
Guilt, right?
No, we're not. We haven't found the guilt yet. Oh, cheaper.
You just went past that.
Oh, it is the guilt
Two
offering.
guilt offerings.
So let me find it again. And these parts of the sacrificial service must therefore be the same. So they're saying that the guilt offering and the sin offering have the exact same meaning. That because if it were true, there would only be one offering. But they do bring up something I think is interesting. After they said every trespass being a sin. That's why they think it's the same thing, right? Because if sin offering is for a sin and guilt offering is your guilt because of sin, then it's a sin offering. But are they right? Now they're saying, see chapter 6, verse 26. They go on, certain analogous instructions respecting the burnt offering and meat offering are appended in verses 8 through 10 by way of supplement, as they ought properly to have been given in chapter 6 in the instructions relating to the sacrifices in question. All that's doing is just convoluting everything. But let's make a comparison. Let me back up again. The translation, and all of its fat he will bring from us, the tail, and the hidden fat in the torso. Right? So we're going to compare that now to chapter 4, verse 8, which says, and these are my translations, and all the fat of the young bull for the sin will separate from the hidden fat, and all the fat that is in the torso. Chapter 3, verse 9, and bring the burnt offering from the pieces offering to Yah, fat of the tail. Everything against the spine he now removes, and the hidden fat, the torso, and the fat that is on the torso. And then 3:3, and bring from the sacrifice the pieces offering to Yahweh, the hidden fat, the torso in the middle, and all the fat on the torso. Of the words, the fat of the tail. Even Ezra believed this was somehow only the fat of the tail. Saadia translated it to say it's fat and the fat tail. Nachmanides somehow conjured up the idea that the fat of the tail was not forbidden, as it is in verses 16 through 17. Wow, that's dizzying. Even Ezra wrote that zeh is only used one time, which is right here, and no one actually knows its true meaning. The Babylonian Talmud, Hulin 11a, said it meant kidney, but Onkelos used the word shazarta, which means skeleton or spine. Now, Colin Deluch wrote, the fat tails which the sheep have in northern Africa. Now, listen to this. This is going to pull it all together. The fat tails which the sheep have in northern Africa and Egypt, also Arabia, especially southern Arabia, and Syria, area where these Jews were at this time, Syria, often weighed 15 pounds or more, and small carriages on wheels are sometimes placed under them to bear their weight, according to some book and some guy. I don't understand what that's about. All right, so they go on. It consists of something between marrow and fat. It's just kind of in between the two. Ordinary sheep are also found in Arabia and Syria, but in modern Palestine, all the sheep are of the broad-tailed species. The broad part of the tail is an outgrowth of fat from which the true tail hangs down. In verses 11 and 16, the fat portions which were burned are called food of the firing for Yahweh. The more minute directions for the meal itself are given in chapter 7, verses 11 through 36. Of course, we haven't gotten there yet, where the meaning of these sacrifices is more fully explained. Of the words, every trespass being a sin, let's talk about that. Now I'm going to try to make it all make sense. All of that mind-boggling stuff we just went through. Kyle and Deluch inserted words, every trespass being a sin. Remember, so you have a sin sacrifice for sin and you have a trespass sacrifice for sin. But is that right? There is a guilt offering and a sin offering. Now, they called it a trespass offering. We're calling it a guilt offering. The guilt offering is for things that we have done in violation of the instructions. In violation of the instructions. Did I mention it was a violation of the instructions given to us concerning the law? The is for rebellion of the law. The instruction of the law tells us that we are not to eat the meat of a sacrifice after so many days. Now, we haven't gotten there yet, but it's going to. The mitzvah, or law, remember that, the Hebrew word for law, is that we must make the meat offering. That's the law. You must make the meat offering. The instruction is that we cannot eat it after so many days. Right? No offering, we have committed a sin. If we mess up the instructions by eating it after we're not allowed to, we have now incurred guilt. So the guilt offering is for the sin we commit against the instructions, while the sin offering is for our rebellion against the law. So let me give you some practical examples, stuff that's come up over the last few years. A guilt offering is necessary if we forgot to wear our, because we didn't do it on purpose. But a sin offering is for someone who has refused to wear the fringe and finally realizes that that's a sin and I want to get right with God, so I make a sin offering. So Another example would be of the guilt offering is we found leavening in our home after Pesach. So what happened here? And this is a better example by far. So the Pesach came, the first night came, we went in the house, we cleared everything out as best as we could. We went through all the cabinets, we went through all the drawers, we checked the shoes in our closet to make sure something didn't get stuffed in there, right? I mean, we've done our very best. And then Pesach's over and you open some drawer and there it is. A loaf of bread or something. I mean, you found something that had leaven in it that maybe you didn't know had leaven in it. And you just happened to read the ingredient because you're like, I didn't remember seeing that. Sure enough, it has leaven. So what have you done? Have you committed a sin or have you incurred guilt? You've incurred guilt because you've messed up the instruction. The sin offering would be needed if we were out of our homes overnight during the Pesach, because the law is we have to stay outside of our houses the whole night on Pesach. If we refuse to do that, or we didn't know that we were supposed to do that, and this is a year where we find that out, now we need to make a sacrifice for that sin, right? Say it with me, right? So here's one last example of guilt. We didn't get our temporary dwelling built on the first day of Sukkot. Right? Build it on the first day. So you get here and it's pitch black and you know that there's all kinds of wildlife out there. It's not safe. You can't see what you're doing. You've been driving for the last 12 hours or you're jet lagged from the flight here or whatever. It's got all day today to do it tomorrow. And so then tomorrow comes around and someone says, hey, we probably should get the kitchen put up. We got to eat. We'll do that because we got all day to get those tents up. So you put the kitchen up. And so you're in the pitch black the next night raising the tents. Did you get your tents in on time? No. Have you sinned? No. But you have messed up the instructions. You have incurred guilt. On the other hand, if we refuse to stay in a temporary dwelling every night of Sukkot, that's sin. All right. Hopefully that helps you understand that there is a difference. Kyle and Duluth are absolutely wrong. There is a difference. That's why there's two different sacrifices. All right. I thought I better look at the clock. We have enough time. Verse 4, and then there's the arrow, to the kidneys and the fat that upon them, that upon the flanks and overhang upon the liver, upon the kidneys, he makes remove now. And again, that should sound very familiar, right? So ve'et shite and tu ha kelayot, both kidneys. Ve'et ha-chelev. Chelev, the fatness word, the fat word that we've had several times already. Yeah, so, and the fat. Ashem, that is on them. And the fat that's on what? The kidneys. Asher al ha-kesalim. And that's on the flanks. So the fat that's on the kidneys and the flanks. Now, if you know anything about animals, you know what the flanks are. If you don't know anything about animals, just go to a dog and do like karate chops right there where his legs are, the roundy part of the leg. Karate chop him there and see if you don't get your face bitten. I'm just saying, I want to live it the way I learned it. It's kind of a hard way to learn that lesson. Anyway, it's the crease in the loin area. So anyway, there's fat there, and he's saying this is what you're going to grab. And it says ve'et hayoteret. That's the leftover, the extra, the stuff that's beyond what you've already taken. It's al ha kaved, and that extra piece of fat that's on the liver, because there is something on the liver. Then it says, al ha-ke-layot, and the kidneys, so the liver and the kidneys, yesi rena. Now you're going to remove that. So that's going to come out last, right? So here's a translation. And the two kidneys and the fat that is on them, on the flanks and the remaining on the liver, and on the kidneys he removes now. Right? So that's a little confusing. The two kidneys and the fat that is on them, on the flanks and the remaining on the liver, and on the kidneys he removes now. So anyway, it's just saying all of it's coming out now, right? But there seems to be an order here that the fat that's on the flanks and the fat that's on the liver comes out last. You take the fat from the kidneys, and then the flanks, and then the liver. Probably it's easier that way. So I'm just having to take a wild hair guess on that one since I haven't never done this. All right, so of the words fat that is on the two kidneys, Onkelos's Vayikra by Drazina Wagner wrote, in other words, they are the diaphragm of the kidneys that were introduced in the verse. And I did that because that's the way they wrote it. All right, let's compare this to chapter 3, verse 4. It says, and the two kidneys and the fat that is on them, imagine that, they're identical. There was one word that ended in a noon in one verse and ended in a mem, sofit, in the other. They're both sofit because it's at the end of the word. That makes no difference. One was masculine, one was feminine, and that's all it is. But otherwise, it's all exactly the same thing. And anybody who tries to go in and make that into some super spiritual thing that God's hiding away for us to find, no, it's just, it's one day he did it in feminine, one day he did it in masculine, because it doesn't matter. Of the words, the fat that is on them, Rashi wrote that this was the fat under the loins. In other words, the white fat visible on the upper part of the flanks. No, Rashi's wrong, because on them is, anyway, the word flanks, ha-kesalim, is a very obscure word. You can see the Sifra and Berachot 40a. Sorry, root kesil, based on the use in Isaiah 13:10. So we may be onto something there. Flanked opposites is how it said. It flanked opposite sides of the stars. So it was used for flanks there. On Onkelos and Targum Jonathan replaced the Hebrew word with the Aramaic words for sides. It's the same thing. The flanks are on the sides. So everybody's kind of agreeing on the same thing, and they all have actually very good reason to say it that way. So I'm not going to disagree with them, because that's the way I see it in what I'm looking at. In other words, the remaining fat on the liver. Rashbam said that the lobe actually grew on the liver. Like I said, I've never slaughtered an animal like this, so I don't know. I've seen it done. And there is, in fact, a fat thing on it, so he's probably right. There's a note in here, remaining or hanging on the liver, the fat that's on the liver, the remainder on the liver, because you can say fat or remainder, it's the same word, has led some to identify this part as the diaphragm, while others interpret as the lobe of the liver. Everybody takes the lobe of the liver now, and has since the Dark Ages, But what was done before that, whether it was the diaphragm taken out or the lobe itself, nobody can really say for sure with the lobe, because they had good reason to think that's what it was. But truthfully, we couldn't tell you what was going on in the Second Temple period or before. Okay. Winding down today. All right. Literally, verse 5 would say, and make smoke with them, the priest, and make burn offering to Yahweh, guilt offering heap. So we're pulling it all together. We've talked about what the offering is, how it's supposed to be done. And so now this is what you're going to do to it now that you've done those things. You've prepped it for what's coming. So vehiketir, R wouldn't roll, sorry. Hiketir, I can't get it out. Anyway, it's to give a scent, to be fragmented, to offer odors, scent, smell. It's like burning, what you call that, incense. This is Otam HaKohen, with them, the priest. Hamiz Becha, not Be'ach, but Becha, right? So this is, and make it burn. And by burn, they mean give it a fragrance, make the smoke ascend, because you're what? You're cooking it. Isheh, you make it burn with fire. You cook it with fire. La Yahweh, so that's to Yahweh. Asham, there's your guilt offering. That's you've acquired guilt for something. So now it's time to sit down and have a meal with, in these days, your rabbi. In those days, your priest. All right, so our translation. And the Kohen will cook, make smoke, he will cook with them a burnt offering to Yahweh. It is the guilt offering. Cook what? Let's make sure you understand this, because this is really easy. It's really, really, really easy. Cook what? Well, you cook the fat of the tail and torso from verse 3 with the 2 kidneys and their fat, the flanks and the remaining fat of the liver and kidneys from verse 4. So here's a compilation of verses 3 through 5 to pull it all together, right? Now this is the first book of Rob, chapter 1, verse, what the heck is he doing? All right, here goes. And the Kohen will cook the fat of the tail with the 2 kidneys, with their fat, the flanks and the remaining fat on the liver and kidneys, a burnt offering to Yahweh. It is his guilt offering. That is, in a nutshell, how you do the guilt offering. Is that simple enough? You bring the offering. The Kohen will cook it with the fat of the tail, with the 2 kidneys, with their fat, the flanks and the remaining fat on the liver and kidneys. It is a burnt offering to Yahweh, and it's called the guilt offering. All right. Okay, well, I only have about 6 minutes, but this is a short one, so I'm going to try to pack it in. Verse 7, all male with priests, he eat them in place holy. He ate holy holies he. Kol zahar, so it's not in the garage. All the males, remember zahar, that's to remember, but it's a sound-alike word. It's spelled a little differently. Zahar is the word for male. So all male, every male, ba kohanim, with the priests. Every male with the priest, yochelenu, or yochlenu, I think is probably more modern, but yochelenu is Bible. He eat them. So they're all going to eat. They are all going to eat together. The men and the priests. Be makom, in that place that is what? Kadosh. holy. Now, it doesn't say Kadashem after that. It says it's holy. Then it says Ye'achel, and that's to eat. They will eat. Then it says Kodesh Kadashim. Who? So you know what it means. All males will eat with the Kohanim. They will eat it in the holy place. That which they eat is holy. We can compare that to, in your English Bible, it's chapter 6, verse 29. In the Hebrew Bible, it's chapter 6, verse 22. Either way, every male among the Kohanim will eat it. It is Kodesh Kadashim. It is very holy. So this isn't our first time, is it? All right, I am definitely out of time at this point. That's as far as we can get it. I hope it's starting to make sense. It will make more and more and more sense as we go through it. This is where it really starts to become clear. I'm so excited to help us get there finally. Shalom, y'all.